Iowa State is going to win a national title this year, and it is 1,000% because we have the greatest head coach in the history of ever. Today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. It's Feel Good Fun Friday here. We got to break down some basketball, but first things first, the most fun, the most feel-good thing you could possibly go over. Otz was in front of a mic yesterday. We're going to break that all down. Then we'll preview the men's game against Cincinnati and the women's game against Kansas. Before we can get that far, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers at FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, I got things I want to talk about, and I don't have enough time to do it. This rant from TJ Otzelberger is insane. I'm not even joking. I've never seen anything like this. TJ gets up in front of the mic on Thursday, just a little bit of pre-Cincinnati, media, whatever. And generally, these are about 10 minutes. Few questions in, few answers out. We keep it moving, okay? Instead, this one goes a little bit differently. TJ gets up there. I'm thankful they started the camera when they did because it seemed like it was going to come out of him whether or not he was ready. I mean, what he had to say, he was going. He gets up there and he's like, hey, before we get started, I got something I want to say. Proceeds to go on an 8-minute and 22-second rant. I mean, just bang, bang, bang. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I was scribbling. I mean, I've got the notes here. It's an entire page. I thought maybe we'd see a couple lines. I wasn't even sure if this was going to be something we were going to talk about. And instead, it's what we're leading the show off with. I mean, this was unbelievable. Okay, let's jump right on into it so I can cover it all. First thing he talked about, he said, the fans at UCF were unbelievable. Granted, this whole thing is predicated on the fact that the flight back from 80-degree, Orlando up into a blizzard, he was kind of in his head a little bit, thinking about things, reminiscing, being grateful. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at with this whole thing. Is he went into this interview, I guess, or this media availability, and that was kind of the latest thing he wanted to talk about, the reason that he wanted to say all this. So he said he's like super thankful for all the fans on the road at UCF, and then he said, we're super excited. The guys are super excited to get back in front of this Hilton crowd, this Ames, Iowa Cyclone crowd. It is unlike anything he's ever seen. Okay, you know that, I know that. This fan base is second to none. Okay, Cyclone Nation, let me hear you. It's unbelievable. We know this. I've said it 1,000 times. Hilton Magic is real, okay? And you really can't argue with me about it. It doesn't matter. Okay, so once he kind of stopped talking about that, he goes right into just one of the greatest hype sessions I have ever seen in my entire life. Goes on to say, this team is doing things that are heroic, things that we haven't quite seen in maybe ever. We need to appreciate this while we have it. First thing he mentioned, Taman, broken thumb right now, balling out, okay? Still going hard in practice every day, still chasing down the 3-ball and getting better at it. And he said this, and I quote, greatest winner I've ever been around. Greatest winner I've ever been around. End quote. Did you notice I repeated myself in there? That was not for dramatic effect. No, he actually said it twice. He said the line twice. Obviously, to say it once is like, whoa. And then he repeated it. He really, really meant it. That was crazy. And yes, I know, Taman. We've talked about it yesterday on the most important Cyclone. I didn't think maybe necessarily he was deserving of that made-up award on that day. But I also made an argument for him, okay? And obviously, I think if TJ Otzelberger had to pick one, it's like, how much does winning matter? Then Taman is in that conversation. And then it kind of goes off of Taman, excuse me, and into Milan. He said, "Hey, Milan getting back out on the floor didn't really have anything to do with where the team was at, but he just fought and fought and fought in his recovery and came back a week, maybe even 2 weeks ahead of where most people would with that same injury." Boom, heroic. This team is special. Then I thought maybe that was kind of where we were going to, the rant was like kind of dying down. This was maybe a third of the way into it. He goes on to talk about the togetherness and the toughness of this team and what makes it so special and why we can't take it for granted. It's just unlike anything we've ever seen before. Then he just went off on every basically starter that this team has, saying Keyshawn really stepped up against UCF. The shot selection and rebounding were the two things the Cyclones had to do well to win that game against the Golden Knights. And Keyshawn in his shot selection was obviously notable. And then 7 defensive rebounds, you just can't look away from. And he immediately spotlighted that. To talk about Joshua Jefferson and his leadership might be overlooked by me. He says, and I think this is a great point. First year in the program. It's going to be tough to be loud in that kind of situation you might find yourself, and you don't want to overstep your bounds, okay? Joshua Jefferson comes in. Look, this is how we're doing things. This is how we're going to get wins. And he was very, very proud, I guess, but I'm trying to think of the greatest word to say here. Like, it was notable the way Joshua Jefferson was a leader. He mentioned that. And then Kurt coming off the bench and the consistency he's provided. He's like, people ask me all the time, how can Kurt come off the bench? It's because of the guy he is. That's the culture that we've built here. And we'll get to culture in a few seconds here. I'm going fast because I'm like halfway through it. Then he starts to talk about the guys coming off the bench, which Kurt is obviously coming off the bench, but kind of that 6th starter, if you will. Talks about Nate Heisey. Okay, and Nate Heisey's a guy that's gotten a lot of flack this year, especially when Milan was out. Those 7 games, we go 3-4. Everyone's talking about, oh, Nate Heisey, is he even a D1 player? This, that, and the other thing. I think he was a square piece trying to go into a triangle little hole there. I don't think that was a case of him being a bad player, just not being the right fit for him. Okay, and TJ kind of goes to talk about that here, saying that when he's diving on the floor to get a ball, that's a 5-point play. That's not a 3-point play because it leads to a Keyshawn 3. There's 4 UCF guys and 1 Nate Heisey on the floor. That's a direct quote. That he's getting that ball, it gets translated directly to a 3. That's where you see Nate Heisey show up. His defensive just aggressiveness is second to none. Directly highlighted that. Brandon Chatfield, they have a thing they call the hammer. Okay, a hammer is when you go get an offensive rebound and you go directly into the put back up and finish that. So when you get 2 hammers on the road in the final, what I like to call the fourth quarter, but 9-10 minutes of the game, that's a big deal. Okay, that's going to put a little bit of a dagger in that game, and he mentioned that directly. Then to talk about Deshaun Jackson, his defensive performance this year has been very solid, and it's only been getting better. And then Demarion Watson, this is a name that has been everywhere. If you're in Cyclone Twitter, anywhere related to the Cyclones, really at all, you'll know Demarion Watson has been a name of headlines almost, very much in everybody's kind of wheelhouse. What we're talking about, should he play more? He should play more. He should play more. Played quite a bit in that 7-game stretch. Not playing right now. And TJ says, nobody in the entire nation, there's not another Demarion Watson out there, okay? Demarion comes in every day, fights, works hard, and is always ready to go. Maybe we'll put him in to start the next game. Maybe we'll put him in the second half. Will it be next game? I don't know. Maybe it's in a few games. He's always going to be ready, and that is almost, I don't want to say the culture, because that's what we're going to talk about in maybe about 2 minutes here, or 1 minute. I'm running out of time. But it's just goes to show what this team is built of. Then he goes basically and says, kind of on a little bit of a lull here, and he's like, hey, people say all the time, live in the moment, all right? Your kids are going to grow up before you even know it, kind of thing. And he's like, hey, I've been here when it wasn't as good. I've been here when there wasn't these heroic stories. Let's enjoy these and acknowledge them while we have them, because they're second to none. Like, what is going on right now, right here, is simply it's unbelievable. Okay. Then he goes on to mention every dude on the team, and I'm not going to do it for the sake of time here. I'm already going up against time. and how they are, coming in working hard every single day. But he named them all by name, and then he talks about the culture on the bench during the game. This dynamic on the bench is just unbelievable. Everybody's working hard every day. I'm going to finish it off with a quote about culture because I've mentioned it, and I think that this, obviously, the culture at Iowa State, unbelievable right now, unbelievable. He said the culture, people talk about that word all the time. I see it as the sum of everybody's decisions when nobody's watching. Are you kidding me? That is just a bar. The dude doesn't miss. You put a microphone in front of him and he will go. This one, 8 minutes and 22 seconds of just pure wisdom. And then I think one question came in before he talked for another 4 or 5. So if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it because it really pumps some inspiration into you. And I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. We're going to talk about it more in the second segment. Stick around because I can't wait. Yeah. Okay. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle. Whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto, Plus Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege, 50 off, and use code lockedoncollege, 50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code lockedoncollege, 50 off at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege, 50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, we're going to break down Iowa State versus Cincinnati. And I said we're going to continue to talk about how epic of a rant Coach TJ went on, and we'll do that kind of towards the end here. Iowa State will be at home against Cincinnati this weekend, 3 o'clock on Saturday. Can't wait. It's going to be electric. All right, you're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Who is Cincinnati? Okay, what are we looking at here? 11th in the Big 12, 15-9, overall 5-8 in the conference. You might look at that immediately and say, okay, Iowa State's going to be fine. We're looking at potentially another Kansas State here just coming in hot to a team that everybody's kind of looking to get. It's a great win on the resume if you can take down an Iowa State. And just to mention how hot they are, 3-game win streak. You get this is Cincinnati, gets UCF by 10, 93-83. You get BYU by almost 20, 84-66. I believe that's 18 if my math is good. And Utah at home as well, 85-75. So are those the most impressive wins I've ever seen? No, I'm not going to lie. They're not. BYU is BYU, but other than that, UCF and Utah, I'm not going to say are turning any heads this season. I mean, UCF, we've talked about how they could be significantly, they could be like a tournament level team, but Iowa State swept them. Just actually finished doing that. So certainly something to keep in mind. But on the year, Cincinnati hasn't been anything crazy. But remember, they came into this season, I think they were top 15 or something around that line preseason. And so you got to pay attention to them. Getting hot, obviously have the potential to be very good. TJ mentioned, Jizzle James, electric. When he gets to his spot, and his confidence right now is just second to none. I've got their kind of leaders, I suppose, in their stats this year. And Jizzle James, dog. Definitely a dog, leading the team with 11.7 points per game. What is that? Lukosius, elite shooter, despite the percentage. Simus Lukosius, as mentioned by TJ, said, kind of that percentage is going down because people in the conference are kind of trying to shut him down. But that doesn't mean he's not a good shooter, right? It's just that's kind of what's happening right now. So obviously Iowa State will look to continue that on Saturday. And if you can shut him down, that'll be a big part of it because he is the second leading scorer on this team at 11.5 per game. Dylan Mitchell is their leading rebounder with 6.5. And then, as I mentioned, James, the leading point scorer, is the leading assist scorer as well. Really, this team kind of goes through Mitchell and James. Okay, Mitchell also leading the team in steals. But more than anything, this is a place where Iowa State, heavily favored. Not going to lie. Great defense. Obviously, Cincinnati also some pretty solid defense, allowing 64.5 points a game this year. Iowa State averaging more points on their own. This is going to look to continue their streak as well as Cincinnati's. But the way I'm looking at this is where Iowa State has to go. Okay, this is not necessarily a turning point game, but it kind of is in the fact that you got to get the ones that you're supposed to get. Iowa State definitely supposed to get this one. Okay, same thing we talked about with Kansas State. You're supposed to get that one, in theory. Now, coming off of the heels of arguably one of the hardest, heart-wrenching losses that you could possibly have with a shot like that, it is something to keep in mind. But teams are going to come into Hilton and they're going to look to get you. They really are. Okay. Now, that being said, I'm going to kind of wrap up what I was talking about in the first segment. TJ is fired up right now. I mean, unreal. I couldn't genuinely believe how fired up he was. And I think that's going to translate to the team, to obviously like the players, but deeper than that, just the people they're around, like the assistant coaches, everyone in that building right now is just juiced up. And it's awesome. Okay, this is one of the best times to do that. Arguably, it's a little bit early potentially, but maybe if he's feeling a lull, and then he's the guy, he's the leader, right? The top dude. And sometimes you don't want your top dude to be the leader. Like you want a guy in the locker room. You always want a guy in the locker room, but you want your guy at the top to be a dude as well. And TJ is the energy. Like I was about ready to run through a brick wall, and he didn't even mention my name. Okay. Now, he just talked about literally everyone on the entire team. Tell me that they are, if he asked them to, I bet they'd tear down Hilton Coliseum, which would be the most ridiculous thing ever. But that building is huge, and they'd find a way to get it done. You get what I'm trying to say here? He's such a motivator, and he wasn't even talking directly to the team, just to the media. He had so much enthusiasm and just gratitude for this team that you could feel it. You could legitimately feel it. I was like, we're never going to lose again. And the Cincinnati game will be the first one on the way there. And that gratitude piece is something that it's interesting, right? Because motivation is just kind of like a fleeting, all right, we got some motivation. Bam, bam. Thank you, ma'am. Here we go. But gratitude, it's deeper. It's like, this is what we are. We're proud to be this way, that kind of thing. And if that's how this team's going to operate, and TJ can preach that, and they can all play for each other, I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And if this is the momentum game, we start to feel it. Milan back on the floor, right? Everyone's kind of getting back into that groove. I believe it's 17-1. I mentioned yesterday, I think I said 15-1, something around that mark. With Milan on the floor, we can get back in that groove. A team that almost beat in Auburn, who has simply been very, very good this year. Not unbeatable, but very, very good. I mean, this is a great spot to get hot, obviously, against a Houston and then in Arizona with, remaining on the schedule. What a time. What a time to be a Cyclone. Okay, we'll probably talk more about that on Monday, because that's what everyone's kind of been talking about right now, is how good this team is. And the Cincinnati game is going to play a role in that. Of course, how do we perform? Do we beat them? How does it go? That kind of deal is going to dictate that a little bit. But at the same time, I mean, let's appreciate what's happened already. Okay. Yes, that seven game skid, a little bit rough. But overall, I mean, it's been such a fun season. Don't even get me started. We'll talk about it later. Last segment, we got to talk about the women taking on Kansas this weekend. Could be another big one for them. Stick around. Coming up right after this. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Iowa State basketball is getting hot right now. We've talked about the men and their coach, TJ Otzelberger, what he had to say, their upcoming match against Cincinnati this weekend, a game, I guess. And now it's time to talk about the women, okay? Big game this weekend against Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And boy, all right, let's just go. All right. Obviously, Kansas, a team that Iowa State has played. Winning that game 78-64 earlier in the season is going to help going into this one. But I am also a fan of the adage. It's hard to beat the same team twice. Generally, I'm a more of a fan of that when you lose the first one. When the Cyclones lose that first one, I'm like, hey, tough to beat us twice, right? And so not that doesn't ever happen, but something that we got to keep in mind, right? Kansas is going to come with basically everything that they've got. Now, looking at Kansas's last few games here, it's been a while. It certainly has been a while, but as it stands right now, Kansas kind of struggling. Okay, in their last 5, 2-3, with a 3-game losing streak. Okay, you want to go to their last 7, and they're 2-5. So not a great stretch of games here. Lost to Arizona and Utah. Then they beat Houston and Texas Tech. Fall to Kansas State, West Virginia, and Cincinnati. Now, relatively tough last 3 games. I'll give them that. Kansas State, West Virginia, 2 very solid teams. The other side of this, though, is I'm noticing they lose to Kansas State by almost 30. Iowa State takes them to overtime. I'm just saying those are different numbers. West Virginia, they score 43 points. I mean, it is what it is, Cincinnati, overtime loss, and Iowa State beats them by how many? 20 points, 72-52. So Iowa State, I think, in a much better spot right now than Kansas, but you got to go on the road and you got to get them, right? That's a part of it. Now, I looked back at the previous Kansas game that Iowa State played, and one thing stood out to me. Iowa State 78, Kansas 64. Took a look at the point scoring. First thing I wanted to see was, obviously it's been a minute since I thought about this game. Was Iowa State pretty even across the board? I would say yes. I would potentially say yes. Audie Crooks still had 33, but your second leading scorer was Emily Ryan with 19. Addie Brown had 10, and Sydney Harris had 8. This was kind of that time when Sydney Harris was scoring quite a few more points. So then I was like, Emily Ryan with 19, man, that doesn't feel like something we've seen for a while. Well, that's because that's right. That Kansas game, that was the most points she scored all year, followed up by her next 3 games. So 4-game stretch of 18, 16, 15. So she went 19 against Kansas, 18 against Utah in a loss, 16 against Arizona State, and 15 against Arizona. Then you got to remember, she did miss the West Virginia game, but in there since then, she's gone 7-7, 5-6, 2-8, 12. So she seems to be back on the up, but we do have to keep in mind here that we got 19 from Emily Ryan in that last matchup. If Emily Ryan comes away with a 2 or a 3-point game here, what else is going to happen? Does she have 15 assists, right? How does that play into it? Does the team go even spread, right? I don't have those answers for you at this time. We'll talk about it Monday, right? But just something to keep in mind, okay? Now, obviously, Sydney Harris, the other name that comes to mind with those 8 points there, and how has she performed recently? Nothing too crazy. Obviously, the 24-point game against Arizona was kind of a standout, other than, I mean, she's got a few other double-digit games, but in her last 4, 5 being the most she scored, 5, 0, 3, 2 in the last 4, going backwards in order there. So no points against TCU. I don't think that's the end of the world. I don't think that the Sydney Harris thing is something we need to keep an eye on, but I'm just very curious how this team right now, as it stands, will attack this Kansas team. Okay, currently sitting at 4th in the Big 12. This Iowa State Cyclones team is very solid, something we've talked about all year. I keep telling you that this team is very much. Oh, hold on. That was the men's team. Okay, they're 7th in the Big 12. And I stand by the statement I just made because they're only 3 games back. The men are actually also 3 games back. So I completely stand by the statement I just made. 17-9. I was like, 19 wins. 17-9, 7th in the Big 12. I stand by the fact that they are still better than their record shows, which is crazy because how many times can you say that? But this team's going to go at some point. They're going to find this rhythm. 8-5 in the conference. I mean, this is a time to add one to that total. And is Kansas ahead of you in the standings right now? No, they're 4-9 overall in the conference. Excuse me, 14-10 overall. So, it's a game you should win, right? That's kind of what we're talking about with the men. What I just said. Do you win the games you're supposed to win? Where are you at there? Okay. And this will be a good measure for a road environment for these ladies and how do they go about this game offensively. Now, you want to talk about rebounds and steals and how many turnovers does this team have has obviously been a conversation this season, and that's all going to be a part of it. But I just want to see offensively, where is this team at? And then I actually am kind of curious just to see what they hold Kansas to. Defensively, I wouldn't say our defense has been a super bright point this season, but we've had great games. You hold Cincinnati to 52. So, hey, this is a big one, though. This is a big one. Now, with only 5 left, you got to go. We've talked about this. I said that about Cincinnati. I'm saying it about Colorado. I'm going to say it until we lose, probably. You got a ranked Baylor and a ranked Kansas State left on the schedule. Going to have to snag them. Okay. Now, I am a little sad that I didn't get to mention the Feel Good Friday shirt until this point in the episode. But, man, TJ just really had a lot to say. So, I was about to record, and I was like, man, I was wearing, I think, the 95 logo shirt that I have. And I was like, I just love that logo so much. But, it's Feel Good Friday. It's Fun Friday. Let's have a great day. I was like, all right, throw on the Hawaiian shirt. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a vibes thing, but I was feeling it today. Feels like everything is up and up with these programs. Obviously football in the conversation as well. We'll probably talk more about that next week. Some coaches rankings caught my eye. And then these basketball teams just seems like everything seems to be going right. Okay. Which is fun. It's very much fun. So let me know what you're looking forward to most this weekend. What's the one thing kind of that you're looking out for. And honestly, let's just have a fun weekend. Let's just ride the lightning, baby. All right. Until next time, Cyclone fans. Sayonara.